Hello, I'm Suzanne Braswell, and I teach French literature in the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures. The focus of my research is 19th and early 20th century French literature, with particular emphasis on the confluence between literature and the arts during this period. Today, I'm introducing the Florida Grand Opera's production of Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann by outlining the cultural context in which Hoffmann's tales were read and appreciated in 19th century France. Long considered a leading figure of misfortune in literary circles, Ernst Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann in fact enjoyed considerable success in his lifetime, owing largely to his mastery of the fantastic tale. Posthumously, his literary renown would continue to grow among a diverse and international public over the whole of the 19th century. This was particularly so in France, where Hoffmann's fantastic tales were translated into French by the German émigré L'Œuvre Weimars. Although other translations of Hoffmann's work were in circulation during the 1820s, it was L'Œuvre Weimars's version of the complete tales of Hoffmann that offered the kind of grandiose proportionality that the French public of that era appreciated particularly. His edition was published in 20 volumes, appearing between 1829 and 1833. Additionally, it included a preface by that most esteemed figure of early French Romanticism, the Scottish author Sir Walter Scott. However, as the French Hoffmann scholar Jean-Claude Yon observes, Walter Scott sensed in Hoffmann a dangerous rival. In Scott's preface, he therefore chose to portray Hoffmann as a tortured and dissipated bohemian who owed his success less to literary skill than to alcoholic excess. For better or worse, the somewhat erroneous image would cling tenaciously to Hoffmann's literary persona. In Renaud Doucet's staging of Jacques Offenbach's comic opera Tales of Hoffmann for the Florida Grand Opera, this image comes through quite clearly. We see it, for example, in the animated tavern scenes, in which a glowing tower rises behind the bar, suggesting an illuminated still, and on which bottles and spirits constitute an upstage presence. These images amplify the figure of the lone bohemian poet struggling to create as he suffers public ridicule, certainly. But contrary to Sir Walter Scott's apparent intentions, such imagery was by no means unappealing to French 19th century readers and audiences. Indeed, Scott's portrayal of Hoffmann as a dissipated bohemian contributed to his appeal, especially among authors of the French Romantic movement, who identified with the image of the visionary poet whose gifts were misunderstood by modern society. Indeed, in 19th century France, Hoffmann is reputed to be the most widely read of the German Romantics. In addition, his work would inspire a host of French authors, including Charles Nodier, Théophile Gautier, Charles Baudelaire, Honoré de Balzac, Georges Sand, and Alfred de Musset. Interest in Hoffmann's tales would also extend beyond a purely literary sphere to be adapted, for example, by Jacques Offenbach and Jules Barbier, who collaborated to create the comic opera Tales of Hoffmann, which debuted in 1881. Although it is not always possible to declare with absolute certainty why the work of a given author seizes the imagination of one period or another, Hoffmann's popularity in 19th century France may, to some extent, be explained by aesthetic, social, and even scientific currents then in vogue. For example, at the time of Hoffmann's death in 1822, Romanticism, which was already a vibrant movement in Germany and England, was just beginning to take root in France. Consequently, the first translations of Hoffmann's work coincided with an emerging aesthetic current among French writers, which also was appreciated by a growing readership. Later in the century, when the perceived excesses of Romanticism had fallen out of favor among the literary avant-garde, it's curious to note that Hoffmann's work did not fall into disrepute. To the contrary, it continued to appeal to a broad public and was adapted to various ballets such as Arthur Saint-Leon's Coppelia in 1870, Levi-Vanos the Nutcracker in 1892, to operatic works, and of course to the comic opera by Jacques Offenbach and Jules Barbier, which will interest us here. However, by the end of the 19th century, the reasons for Hoffmann's continued popularity had changed, especially among writers and contemporary thinkers. Most notably, as end-of-the-century consciousness began to turn its attention to signs of decadence in art, literature, and society, the darker recesses of consciousness that Hoffmann's work explored, as well as the attribution of fevered alcoholism that was associated with his literary persona. These lines of interest seemed to speak simultaneously to a diverse audience. It included a public concerned with social degeneracy and its moral implications, a budding community of 19th century neuroscientists and their followers, which revolved around contemporary studies in hysteria and monomania conducted by Pierre Janet and Jean-Martin Charcot, and an artistic milieu that was seeking renewal in a time of perceived decline and aesthetic exhaustion. The complexity of Hoffmann's tales, with their troubling and often ironic focus on the unstable depths of the human mind, therefore had broad and even elastic appeal, as did the rich style of his prose. To be sure, the tales of Hoffmann belong to that privileged family of works that not only survived the aesthetic and social vicissitudes of 19th century France, but also flourished in its changing tides, to be embraced by a changing literary avant-garde, composers such as Offenbach, and a broad public of readers and spectators. If Hoffmann's tales and Offenbach's operatic interpretation of them seem to correspond to so many of the aesthetic and social currents of 19th century France, we may ask how operatic artists of our own era have interpreted and staged Offenbach's tales of Hoffmann. Joining us from the theater department are my colleagues Henry Fonte and Michiko Kitayama-Skinner, who will discuss the Florida Grand Opera production with the director Renaud Doucet and designer André Barbe.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hello, my name is Henry Fonte. I am the chair of the Department of Theater Arts at the University of Miami.
Hi, I'm Michiko Kitayama-Skinner. I'm a costume designer and assistant professor in theater arts.
Today, we will be talking to Renaud Doucet, the director of the production of The Tales of Hoffmann at Florida Grand Opera. We will be talking to him from Montreal via Skype. Hello, Mr. Doucet, how are you?
Hello, good, thank you, and you?
Very well, thanks. We'd like to know a little bit about the central concept of the production. Did the production team want to take us into an almost Kafkaesque world?
I think Kafkaesque, we have to ask Offenbach himself. What did he want it to do? You know, Kafkaesque, that depends. For sure, Hoffmann is an enigma. It's an enigma because Offenbach never completed his work. And what's very strange is that as much as Offenbach was writing extremely fast, this opera took forever and was never completed. He died before. He wanted to create his chef-d'oeuvre, and that never happened. It's funny for somebody who was had a very good reputation, writing all his operettas. You know, La Vie Parisienne, La Belle Hélène. He was extremely successful, but he was never satisfied. He wanted to compose an opera and not an operetta. As if we always consider an operetta to be a minor work compared to the big opera stage. He started with Les Fées du Rhin, which was a major failure. So is it Kafkaesque? Yes, mostly for anybody who tried to produce the work. This is mostly a big nightmare.
Mr. Doucet, each act has dramatically different mood and atmosphere and maybe styles. We can see that you're trying to tell each Hoffmann tale as a different experience to the audience. Would you explain to us what the inspiration for each act?
Yeah, first, what we tried to do when we looked at the tales of Hoffmann, we have to understand that there is no score existing. We have to understand that there is as many scores as there are productions, because there are pages reappearing all the time, and there is no definite version of what the tales of Hoffmann are supposed to be. To do Hoffmann is to make choices. So everybody can argue if the choices are right or the choices are wrong, but it's to make choices. We could do the tales of Hoffmann in 6 hours. There is that much material that it could be a total endless evening, and it would have, you know, pages from everywhere. So, you know, We need to, knowing that mostly operas, because of union, especially in America, have to fit within 3 hours with 2 intermissions, and that the union for the change of set needs to have a minimum of this time, and that the orchestra needs a break on this time, and that the singers, if they're singing the 3 roles, need a minimum of rest in between the acts. That is mostly telling us how much we can spend on the material. So it is not only an artistic decision, but it is also a financial decision. We would love to do more of Hoffmann, yes. In Europe, you can spend some time because there are national houses sponsored by the government. So if the Tales of Hoffmann has 4 hours and a half, there's no problem. Here in North America, it is a big problem. So the 1 year after Offenbach's death, there was a big celebration that was held for him, where Henri Meillac unveiled the statue, the bust of Offenbach that we can still see. And Meillac was a collaborator of Offenbach, since he worked with him on libretto for La Vie Parisienne, La Belle Hélène, La Grande Duchesse de Gerolstein. Was a very famous writer for opera. He unveiled the statue of Offenbach and made a big speech. So what we did as the starting point of the production is to go back to this moment, to the unveiling of the statue of the bust of Offenbach, and then the statue comes back to life and is leading us through the story, not only of the story of Hoffmann, but the story of Offenbach writing Hoffmann, and hiding us pages of the score and taking some from other places and other scores and trying to lead us through this labyrinth that he created through this wonderful musical score and dramatic score, but totally unfinished, which is a puzzle for anybody who tried to achieve it. So that's really the base of the production. It's also a moment in France, where we start to have the industrialization, Eiffel starts to build Le Quai d'Orsay and all those monuments. It will soon be the Eiffel Tower. So it's all these buildings that was the key element for the visual of the set. With those big verrières like the Grand Palais, it's all this moment where in Paris, this architecture starts to take life, like his score. Like we can see, was strongly influenced with that. For example, in La Vie Parisienne, when you have the train arriving, the whole thing, the whole scene, first act in the train station, all the industrialization and all those parts are very present because it was in the mood of the time. But to come back to your question, there is a lot of different mood. There is the tavern that we see. Then we go into the tales. But the tales of Hoffmann are mostly the point of view of a man on women. I would be extremely, if I would have the direction of a company, I would hire a woman to stage Les Contes d'Hoffmann. I would be extremely interested to know what a woman would have to say on this piece. Because it's a very men-oriented point of view on women. Okay, and I am sure women react very differently to that. Hoffmann speaks about his 3 ladies. But in fact, the first one, Olympia, the doll, is what a young man would take as a sexual desire. This envy, this desire, and this object of beauty, but this object of, sexual desire. Offenbach was way too witty, okay, to write, coloratura vocalise like he did, not to have understatement under. When she's going ha 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 ha, it's not that she's laughing so much. We need to understand that there is a lot of, in his operettas, there is a lot of sexual insides. One of the most famous one is in La Vie Parisienne. The name of the girl is Metella. But when the two guys repeat her, mettez-la, oh, mettez-la, that means, please excuse my language, her.